Oseo
Oseo.
and konnichiwa, good afternoon in Japanese. I'm going to start right off with a quote from Paul Klee. Paul Klee was a Swiss artist from the early part of the 20th century to 1940. This is his quote. In the womb of nature, at the source of creation, where the secret to all lays guarded, although not everyone can enter. But our pounding heart drives us down, deep down to the source of all. What springs from this source, dream, idea, or fantasy, must be taken seriously only if it unites with the creative means to form a work of art. And then these works become realities, art realities, which help to lift life out of its mediocrity. And not only do they add more spirit to the already seen, but also to make secret visions visible. Paul Klee, Essay on Modern Art. I'm going to start right off also with what's prompted my theme today, kind of a combination. A friend of ours in Nevada, his name is Ted March, brilliant fellow. He's a pilot with an airplane. And he made a video, is the way I call it, that I just saw last week of flying over the region that he points out on a map had once been the inland sea, now the Great Basin. And with overlays on the films, the way I talk, he shows us the ancient beach lines and the dates for these beach lines, like 18,000 years or 10,000 years. Even one was very fascinating to me, a bluff with the image of a wave action in the bluff. So all of that stimulated in me a very, very strong intuitive feeling experience that I have had there in Nevada, in this area. And I've worked this out, so I'm reading this. A fluid equation, very Japanese, very Pacific Oceanic. An experience of something deep into the prehistory of humans, to see anew the time of a particular waterborne people, a water world, a water culture, having, like any culture surrounded by waters separate from the mainland, yet one with the ocean, the feeling of animate-inanimate identity. My mind's immersion backwards in ancient waterways, the innermost body of a very, very ancient human and a very ancient time. So that gives me to introduce my theme here. This is a Japanese makimono, is a scroll painting. And this is of an island. I have had a long experience and study in Japanese art. It was my first graduate thesis that I did. And in all my experience and collection of Japanese scroll paintings, this is quite rare, if not, exceptional, this painting here. Now again, all to the Chinese and Japanese paintings are always painted horizontal. They're not up on an easel. The nature of the calligraphy brush dictates that it has to be horizontal. So always keep that in mind, because when we view the paintings, we are viewing them hanging up this way. And in this painting here, I call this is a Kenshin. Kenshin being a devotional painting, exactly. And the painting is of an island, And this is also in what I had been talking of earlier, Shinto. Shinto is very, very broad. It's a native Japanese culture. And it has different stages. In the early stage, we would just say it's nature. It's nature in the sense of rocks and mountains and trees and streams. And so the kami are the spirits that are in these places. So that's one thing to see in this painting here. The name of the island is Chikubu. Chikubu is the Japanese word for nipple. And this island is in a lake, Lake Biwa. And Lake Biwa is a very large lake, somewhat in southern central Honshu. So that's where that it is located. And in the details of this painting, it's just amazing. Like the painter used a brush with maybe one or two hairs on it here. So within the island, there is a Shinto shrine. That's the jinja. The jinja is the shrine that's in there. And also down here, there's even the little boat, ostensibly the painter coming to the island this way. So all of this is showing this. Now again, the island is itself a divinity, the kami. Makami in this is the goddess of the island. And very interestingly, this calligraphy here is, we would call it Janushigami. That is the landlord Magami, the goddess, the deity that's connected to the island. And starting with these characters here, this character here is the character Shima. And of course, recently, remembering the times of the bombing of Hiroshima last week, people have much heard the word Shima, which means island. And if I put this character next to that character, like that, then it's Shimaguni. And Shimaguni then is the island empire, is the way the Japanese know that. There are hundreds of islands around Japan. I was on a ship there, and not only do you have many, many, many boat encounters, native boats, but also you'll see many, many islands. This island, however, is located in Lake Biwa, and it's a very important. At the time that I was a graduate art student in Mexico, with the government director's permission, I stayed with a Tarascan family on an island in Lake Pátzcuaro. So I got some feeling of it. And I learned from the people there, the way that they would say it, the lake is her body, and the islands are parts of her body. So we would have something similar here with this. Now back to the calligraphy, this character here is Nushi. Nushi would be like the chief, the master, the landlord, anything like that. With this stroke right next to it, it changes a bit. That is Su. So Su, Nushi, then says is resident. In other words, the chief, Magami, in this is also the resident in the island. And most interesting is the character here on top. It's doubled. Just the stroke like that one would be Ima. Ima is going to pertain to anything of the present or time or now. And the little stroke underneath of it then pronounces that as Chi'i Sia, Sia. And that makes this small. And why the two are like that is that the person who is writing this and putting it together as their experience knows this to be Satamiya, and that is a two-shrine complex where one shrine is located conveniently, accessibly, and the second shrine is high up in the mountain, inaccessible and secluded. So that's what the person has told us about this situation. And the way that I've been able to translate this is, quote, "In the small shrine, I shared a rare moment with the divine Makami, the chiefess resident of the island." So that tells us that this is a devotional painting, presumably the experience of a person who had a moment. It's the way you put it. I lived in such an hour. I lived in such a moment with her, with the divinity of the island. And so the pieces I have here, here's the mask, and here's there, and here there, is a way for me in this setting to extol the inherent Megami, that is the female divinity of the island itself. Again, Chikubu is nipple there. Now to go on a little bit farther, we're going to go down here. And this figure here, made out of clay, is prehistoric, we would say. It's called a haniwa. Haniwa were figures made by prehistoric people in Japan around 2,200 years ago here. And what it has to do with my theme here is that I had seen an old Japanese movie. Actually, I had to even have the video of it. I don't know the name of it, but the main thing is this movie was filmed on this island. And the story in the movie is some bad men, some bad guys had somehow came over to this island and took it over and oppressed the resident natives on the island to bend them to their will, whatever that was. And so some of the residents kind of stole away from the watchful eye of these oppressors and did some kind of a ritual or a ceremony to the earth on the island. And something began to move and yeast and emerge from that. And it emerged exactly as this Haniwa man. And he came up out of the earth, out of the dirt, like that, formed like that. And of course, as the story goes, having this guy walking around and confronting these bad guys was enough for the bad guys to decide they would leave the island and leave, the people alone. And the people were very thankful to the Haniwa man. And the Haniwa man shook himself and settled himself back down into the island. So there, that shows us that the Haniwa is the guardian, the Haniwa man is the guardian of the island. So that's very, very incumbent here. And I put the two sake cups, as a offering, sake as the standard offering. Now let's go to this next figure here. Now the Shinto, we're calling it that name. This name Shinto has been derived from reading the Chinese characters, Shintao, usually translated as spirit way. The Japanese words are actually kamimichi. Kamimichi would mean the way of these spirits or these beings. In Native America, the only people that have something comparable to this would be the Navajos, as we call them. They have sand paintings, and in these sand paintings they have figured images for these deities. In Japan, this didn't take place until Buddhism entered into Japan. Now, Buddhism, it has many figures with it, and these figures are always, in display for people to worship and contemplate and venerate. However, with the Shinto figures, again, the Shinto were spirits, but with now the coming of a civilized government, civilized state, and all of this all takes on something new. So somehow whoever was governing the native culture, we call Shinto, thought they better make some figures also. So these figures, we will now refer to them as sculptures of Shinto deities. The difference, though, with the Buddhism, which is all in display, is the Shinto figures are hidden. They are not displayed at all. They are not worshipped. They are encased in shrines and things like that. Symbolically, they're there, but you don't see them. But, there has come about a standardization. So this figure here is the standardization of the figure of the Makami, the goddess of the island. And she is known as Ben Saito, which is a co-joined of eloquence and treasure. And her symbol is the lute. Now, the name of the lute in Japanese is biwa, and the name of the island, the name of the lake that the island is in is Lake Biwa. And it seems that people kind of felt the shape of the lake was the shape of a lute, a biwa. So that's how it came about. If you go over here to this piece here, in the place of having obvious figures or even no figures at all in the Shinto, there were other ways to denote the presence of the spirit, the kami. And this would be called a gohai. It's a stick or a wand or a staff with these papers on it, streamers like that. And also a straw rope would be another indication. That just means, the presence of. And the boats coming to the island would have masts on with streamers like this, coming off of it. So that's how that figures there. Now, down here, we have a frog. And in Japanese, the frog is kairu. Kairu means frog, but also means to return home. So people visiting a shrine will, somebody will sell them for donations, little frogs. Little frogs, they put in their purse, put in their pocket, or carry with them for a safe return home. It also applies to, return to good health. So all of that is all very much a part of that, of having the frog here, keiru. Now, let me read this really very, very apt poem. The name of the poem is Island by Miss Ishigaki Rin, a 20th century woman poet. I stand in a looking glass, a dot, a small island, separate from everyone. I know the island's history, the island's size, its waist, bust, hip, differently dressed in each season, singing birds or hidden fountain, fragrance of flowers. I live on my island, cultivate it and build it up, and yet I can't know all of this island. I can't settle on it forever. In the looking glass, I gaze at myself, a far-off island, yohai. Yohai is worship from a far shrine. Arigato.